Hi everyone, Ryan here from Fight Game Analysis, and today we're going to be talking about the upcoming fight between Shakur Stevenson and Robson Conceicao. Before we jump into that, if you've been enjoying the content, please go ahead and click on the like button and also subscribe to the channel. Really appreciate your support. Alright, Shakur Stevenson, coming off his super impressive victory over Oscar Valdez, is set to make a title defense against Robson Conceicao. Now look, I'm guessing that a lot of people are sleeping on the skills that Conceicao possesses. All right, this guy's 33 years old, out of Brazil, former Olympian. And not just an Olympian. He won a gold medal. So he qualifies for the Olympics in 2008, qualifies again in 2012, qualifies again in 2016. Now, 2008 and 2012, he got put out early, lost both times in the first round. 2016, he comes back, snatches up the gold medal. Right now, you may be thinking, 33 years old, three-time Olympian, lost the first two times, nothing all that special. Maybe he's a little bit overrated. Maybe he got lucky in his gold medal title run, right? Maybe all the real competition turned pro already. It was just happened to be this time when things weren't as challenging as they may otherwise be. I get it. The Olympics aren't what they used to be, and I get it that the amateur ranks aren't quite what they used to be decades ago, right? Guys turn pro early, and they do this and they do that, and maybe the competition isn't quite there relative to what we used to see. But when you go out and you win a gold medal, it is still incredibly impressive. When you go out and you win a gold medal at the Olympics, it still means that you have there's a basement, right? There's a basement to your skill set, and it is still really high. By the time it was all said and done, this guy had like 400 amateur fights. Now look, I'll be the first to admit, and I'm not alone in this, when you go out and you rack up 400 amateur fights, it's too much. It's too much, man. It's all the wear and tear on the body. It's not against the absolute best in the world. You're not making any money for it. The fame and recognition is all the way down here relative to what you're going to get in the pros. Like, the risk-reward payout just isn't there. Maybe you go with like 100 or 150 amateur fights, right? That's the type of thing that you typically see from a lot of top Americans. But I'll also say this. I was talking to this guy who owned a gym. This is a long time ago. I want to say maybe 10 years ago. I was talking to this guy who owned this gym. This happened to be... Was it Chicago? I don't remember exactly. Anyways, I'm talking to this guy who owns this gym. He was originally from Mexico. He came up here. He opened a gym. He worked with a lot of kids, and he had one guy who had just turned pro. And we were talking just a little bit kind of about the structure of the amateurs, decisions people make, what they do, different kinds of things. And he was talking to me about how things were down in Mexico. And he said, I don't know if you notice, but when you see fighters come out of Mexico, they don't have these super incredible amateur careers. You don't see a lot of fighters coming out of there with 100 amateur fights, 150 amateur fights, 200 fights, things like that. And one of the guys that he mentioned as a reference was Canelo. And I said, yeah, I noticed it. I always imagined that the reason for that was guys want to turn pro. You can turn pro down there when you're like 16. Relative to the United States, you got to be 18. And it's because guys want to start earning money. You don't earn money in the amateur ranks. Nobody pays you to go to the Olympics. The way that Olympians make their money is after they win the medal. Then they come out and off that recognition, they do better. But through that whole process, through the amateurs and everything, nobody's getting paid. So I figure guys want to turn early because they want to make a living, right? Makes sense. He said that's not really the case. Although that definitely plays a factor. His concept was the way people just view the amateur ranks, period, is incredibly different. He said the amateurs is there really to get the nerves out of you. It's really there so that you get comfortable under the lights. It's there so that you're comfortable performing in front of a crowd. And then we take your amateur career slow. You may rack up 30 you take your professional career slow. You may rack up 30 or 40 professional fights before anybody even knows who you are. You're out there fighting retired teachers, you're fighting taxi cab drivers, you're fighting bums, like whatever it is, right? But this is where you're figuring things out. This is where you're seeing your different styles. This is where you're starting to really learn your craft. Get the subtleties of things down before you start to get elevated to that next stage and you want to like really make a run. And that makes a lot of sense. I understand that. Now, do I think that's the best method? I don't know. Do I think that racking up all these amateur fights is the best method? I don't know. I don't really know that. I know that when the time comes and you get to that place, you need to be ready. How guys get ready, how guys get to that place, I think there's more than one way to skin a cat. But one thing I am comfortable saying, you rack up 400 amateur fights, man. It's just too much. The human body can only take so much. You can't go out there and get beat on forever and then come up and still be 100%. There's only so many punches you can take in your life. And if you take too many of those punches in the amateur ranks, you don't have the ability to take them in the professional ranks. And the pros is where we get the recognition. The pros is where we get the money and the fame. And the pros is where we're able to build things. So I would always think that it's best to save your best for the biggest and brightest stage. All right, now that we got that out of the way, we talk a little bit about Conceicao. Now, Conceicao has this incredibly extensive amateur career, and you can tell that he learned how to fight. A lot of people may not know who he is. He may not be the biggest name. If it wasn't for the fact that he was fighting Shakur Stevenson, he may not even be, this main event type guy. Doesn't change the fact that he knows how to fight. But here's one of the problems with him. As skilled as he is, as much as he possesses, even though he knows how to fight, he doesn't always show us that. If we look at the fight against Korea, Conceicao got dropped in a second, got 2 points deducted for low blows. Not his best fight. Some people even thought that he lost. You look at him when he steps in there against his next fight, against Ahumada. Did he get a lot of good work done? Yeah. Looked real good, landed a bunch of punches, throw good combinations, good work. But man, those punches were wide. Man, he was there to be hit. Good against the guy that he was fighting against. If you fought that same way against top-level talent, you're done. Threw a lot of hooks, stayed in the pocket far too long, didn't use head movement, there to be caught. All not good things. Then he goes in there and he steps in against Oscar Valdez. Now, he was a big underdog coming into that fight against Oscar Valdez. A lot of people thought that it was going to be, I don't want to say necessarily a showcase for Valdez, but he was going to go out there and he was going to look good. But Conceicao showed up. Dude, he looked really good in that fight. He was keeping the distance behind the jab. He was working angles. He wasn't staying in spots too long. He was using his combinations well. He was fighting long and tall with the reach advantage. Like, dude, he was giving Valdez real trouble, particularly early in that fight. And you think, wow, is this the skills that he possesses all the time? Why doesn't he always show us this? Why are there times when he seems to have a lapse in focus or a lapse in judgment or whatever it may be? Maybe he just is one of those guys that rises to the level of his competition. You got to put him in there against the best in the world if you want him to be his best. Not what the fans want to see, not necessarily what the trainers want to see, but, sometimes guys are like that, man, right? The flip side is sometimes guys break under the big lights. Sometimes you shine the brightest lights on them on the biggest stages, and they just don't show up. They just can't figure out a way to put it together. The nerves get to him. It happens, right? Floyd Mayweather used to talk about how his opponents had never been under the bright lights like he had. So when they got into those fights with him, I feel like he always used to try to ramp up the publicity, ramp up the pre-fight stuff to get them to be nervous. Like, if you can't perform when all the cameras are in front of your face, when everybody cares, when it always matters, you got a glass ceiling. It was one of the things that I remember Freddie Roach used to say about Manny Pacquiao. He said there isn't a stage in the world that's too big for Manny Pacquiao. And it just means that no matter what happens, no matter where you put him, no matter how intense the scenario gets, Manny Pacquiao was always going to bring his A game. You could depend on him to show up. He was not going to look flat. He was not going to wish that he was somewhere else when he was in the locker room warming up. Like, he was going to be there and he was going to show out. And not everybody's like that. And sometimes we take that for granted. Sometimes that's not the case. So when we think about a guy like Conceicao, what's he going to do against Shakur Stevenson? Well, look, if history is any indication, we should see the best version of him, because this is a bigger fight than the one he had against Oscar Valdez. And he's 33 years old. He knows how things work, man. He goes out there and he loses the fight against Oscar Valdez. He gets another shot against Shakur Stevenson, who is the man now at 130 pounds. If he were to drop this one, if Conceicao were to lose this fight, what does he think, his future would look like at 130? What's his potential for snatching up a world title or being the best guy in the division or fighting these huge big name fights again, right? Probably not too much. So he knows, he feels the pressure. So he probably wants to show up at his absolute A game too and just have a phenomenal camp. Got plenty time. Fight set for like September 23rd. So there's a lot of time left to have this camp, break down the film, study things, and show up. And I hope he does, man. I hope he comes out and just looks phenomenal. But here's the problem. Here's the whole catch in that scenario. The problem is he's got to do it against Shakur Stevenson. The problem is he's got to do it against one of the best young guys out there in boxing right now, period. The problem is that he's got to do it against somebody incredibly talented, who's also incredibly focused, who's also incredibly dedicated, who's also significantly younger than you. Dude, I'm big on Shakur Stevenson, man. I think this guy is the future in a lot of ways. I think at 130, 135 pounds, maybe even one day he moves up to 140. Dude, I think he can give almost everybody trouble. I think he beats most, if not all of the guys there. He just hasn't done it yet. Literally, he just hasn't done it yet. But look at the skill sets he possesses. Look at the way he works that jab. Look at that counter right hook, right? Look at that check right hook that he used in the 6th round when he dropped Oscar Valdez, man, beautiful. He's out there, he's boxing Oscar's ears off to start that fight. Keeping him at distance, working the jab, not letting Oscar Valdez get set, not letting him build a rhythm, not letting him get into a flow. Just goes in there and he's pitching a shutout absolute masterclass. So what does Valdez do, man? He's no bum. He starts to try to make adjustments. He starts to try to be aggressive. He starts to try to come forward, use a little bit of feints and stuff. So we see that 6th round start. He's coming forward. He's trying to close the distance. He's trying to be aggressive. Shakur Stevenson having none of it. Shoots a beautiful little check right hook. Sits him right down. Puts Oscar Valdez right on the canvas. No easy task, man. It's easy to look after a fight like that and think, maybe we overrated Oscar Valdez. Maybe we looked at him too much. Maybe we gave him too much credit. And Shakur Stevenson was just the guy to come and expose it. But I reject that whole theory, man. I reject that entire theory. This isn't about what Oscar Valdez didn't bring to the table. It's about how good Shakur Stevenson looked. I think Shakur Stevenson's going to look even better in this fight against Conceicao. Completely different styles. So maybe he doesn't go out there and pitch a shutout. That's what we saw against Valdez. But I think Valdez's style was, that type of style is built for Shakur Stevenson to shine against. A smaller fighter who needs to be aggressive, coming forward, that's always going to be just setting the stage for an absolute epic performance by a guy like Shakur Stevenson. Okay, so this isn't going to be that because that's not the way Conceicao fights. Conceicao is actually taller and longer than Shakur. Usually Shakur at 130 pounds is the guy having the height and the reach advantage. Won't be the case in this one. Okay, doesn't make any difference at all. I think Shakur Stevenson is the man at 130. I put him as a favorite basically against everybody in the division. I expect him to win this fight. I expect him to win all the fights he gets at 130. Probably most of the ones he gets at 135. Won't even be competitive. Right? Now, not everybody. Don't get me wrong. You put him in there against Gervonta Davis or something. I'm not suggesting that this won't be a competitive fight or something. Don't take those words out of context. But I think you get what I mean when I talk about how talented this guy is. I think you understand where I'm coming from when I talk about what he has in store. People inside the sport, got Andre Ward, Jay Prince, Floyd Mayweather, right? People who know boxing, who are in there on the inside, who are working in the ranks in management, promotion, things like that. They were high on Shakur Stevenson all the way back when he was in the amateurs, man. All the way back when he was coming out of the Olympics. Because they could see it. They knew what this kid possessed. They knew how talented he was. Well, he was a kid back then. He's a man now. But they knew what he possessed. They knew what was in store. And now we're getting to see it all develop. We're getting to see it all right in front of us, and it's a beautiful thing. So what do I think is going to happen in this fight with Conceicao? Dude, I think it's going to be the Shakur Stevenson show. I think we're going to get to see more developments, more evolution, more masterful performances from one of the hottest young guys out there right now. Like, I'm super excited. He's not even wasting any time. Comes out with, and very quickly after that epic performance against Valdez, sets his next opponent. Doesn't set a bum. Doesn't set a guy that nobody wants to see. Doesn't set a fight with Rob Sulka or Ron Sulka, whatever that dude's name was. This isn't one of those fights. This is one of those old school tune-up fights. This isn't a victory lap after you win the belt. Conceicao's legit. And I still fully expect Shakur Stevenson to go out there and look incredibly impressive. That's how good he is. So let me know what you guys think. Am I too high on a Shakur Stevenson horse? Am I holding the flag up a little bit too high? Am I becoming enamored with what he brings to the table and I can't really see the flaws that he possesses? Is Conceicao the type of guy that's going to be able to expose those flaws? I mean, look, he's tall, he's long, he's got a jab, he's got fast hands. He's got a lot of experience from the amateur ranks. Is he going to be able to go out there and do something that these fighters in the past weren't able to do? Give Shakur Stevenson a little bit of trouble? I don't know. I don't think so, but I've been wrong in the past. What do you guys think about it? Let me know.